Welcome to MSL Talk with Tom Caravela, a podcast specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Kathy Andorfer. She is the U.S. medical lead for the dermatology team at Bristol Myers Squibb, and we talk about the art of coming out of your comfort zone, which is awesome, and Kathy's awesome, and you guys are going to love this, so I appreciate you joining and listening, and don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube and Instagram and MSL Talk Live on Clubhouse. So thanks, guys. Kathy Andorfer, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, Tom.
Kathy, you know you're one of my favorite guests of all time, one of my favorite people. So I couldn't wait to have you come back.
Well, I am really, really excited to be here. I had such a fun experience the first time, received such great feedback, and just really, really pleased and excited to be back.
Yeah, well, this is going to be an interesting, almost a part two, it kind of, in a way. I don't want to give anything away, but it's going to be a continuation from our first episode. So for those people out there that may not have heard the first episode and don't know who you are, let's do a quick intro.
Sure thing. So I'm Kathy Andorfer. I am currently leading a national team of MSLs at Bristol Myers Squibb, and I've been there for just about a year. So made the change after we did our last podcast, and I'm really passionate about MSL development and building MSL careers to elevating it to an art form.
And you are doing that right now in ways that I keep hearing from people all the time about how awesome you are and how you're such a great leader and people responding to the podcast. So let's jump into that piece of it, because as I was getting kind of responses and reach outs from people that listened to the first podcast, a lot of people were saying that, number one, they were really super surprised that you're an introvert. And it really resonated with them about the whole concept of stepping out of your comfort zone to bring yourself to the next level. That just kept coming up. So we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to let you kind of do a continuation and kind of run with it. But talk about how that worked for you, because you've been so successful and you have so much going on. And we're going to talk a lot about that in a little bit later. But how do we pick up from where we left off?
Well, I also received a lot of great feedback on the podcast, and there were so many people who had that same comment, like, I can't believe you're an introvert, or that you have been so successful in your career while saying that you're an introvert. And that gave them hope and inspiration. And I'm glad that's the case. And I'm not surprised, though, because I think about 30 to 40% of the population is introverted. So, and there's probably even more that gravitate toward the medical and scientific community. So it makes sense to me that your audience would potentially resonate with this. And I've been very lucky to build this great career, and hopefully it's an example to all that whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, it's possible to build a great career as an MSL.
Well, it's funny, because as I'm having conversations with people and as I continue to do this podcast, it's not a debate, but the question comes up, what's better? Is it actually better to be an introvert than to be an extrovert? And if so, why? Or am I just making that up? Is it just, it's 50-50 across the board? I don't know.
I'd say definitely neither, right? I think however you fall within that spectrum, you have the potential to build an amazing career. It's just going to be different. And like for an introvert, you have that more natural inclination to long hours of study and the concentration that's needed to build all of the skill sets that gets you to being in a professional role, and then studying the science and being really good at those details. At the same time, an extrovert is going to have a much easier time with the social networking and the presentations and putting yourself out there which is really needed to elevate your career. So neither one is better than the other. They each have their unique challenges and they each have their unique gifts. And for me, I think the most important thing is learning about yourself. Who are you? And building the tools that can help you succeed. And also giving yourself grace, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, recognizing that and saying, okay, well, I may struggle a little bit with talking to strangers. Okay, so I know this about myself. What can I do to work around that? So again, building tools and systems to help you wherever you fall.
So you're saying it's a good exercise to kind of, even as people are listening to this, you're in medical affairs, or maybe you're in MSL, to kind of self-identify and maybe take a step back. Are people born one way or another? Do you feel like this is something that people should really kind of focus on? And then once they kind of identify, then they can take steps to move forward in a certain direction?
Yeah, so I'd say, it's a little bit of an oversimplification to say someone's born that way because there's a lot of other elements.
Right.
But to a certain extent, yes, there's been studies that have done with children as small as 4 months of age, and they can predict based on their response to novel stimuli how that child will grow up. And so they took children and they assessed them for their response to stimuli, novel stimuli, and then assessed them throughout period of 10 years. And they found that their response in the beginning at 4 months was stable to 10 years and really could predict whether a person was an introvert or an extrovert.
Wow.
Yeah.
Geez, throwing stats out. I love it.
Yeah, so I think biology is a huge element of it. And recognizing that is super helpful in terms of understanding yourself. And if you own who you are, whatever that is. And, that's, of course, introvert, extrovert, that's just one label within a whole series of personality. At the same time, it's one element. And if you can work around that, there's other things you can work around as well.
Well, let's talk about that. So what other things do you think folks need to work on? Let's start with extroverts. Like, what do you think extroverts really need to work on to make them succeed in the MSL role?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say, extroverts have their own set of unique challenges and their own unique set of gifts. So from a challenging perspective, introverts are recharged with solitude, whereas extroverts are actually recharged by being around people. So I'm sure they of all groups of people have suffered the most during the pandemic, that isolation that's come to them, that's made it harder for them to get what they need to be their best self. And just being an MSL, that can be a challenge too, because we do live a lot of our life in isolation. Yes, we get to be very social at congresses and when meeting with physicians and that, but there's also a lot of time in the office doing self-study. And so that can be a challenge for an extrovert. And in fact, I had an MSL that I met very early on in my career, who he loved so many elements of the job and he was really good at it. But he was actually suffering because he didn't get enough people time. And he would go in-house as often as he could. And he lived nearby because he needed to be around more people. And so he quickly transitioned from being an MSL, I think he only made a year and a half, into a home office role. And he thrived there. And every time I look at his career, he's like global director of the world, basically, because
Wow.
he identified his own personal needs and adapted his career to that.
Awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
I could kind of identify with that a little bit because I'm a natural extrovert. Probably because I'm a twin. I mean, I shared a womb with another person. I was never alone.
So you've needed people your entire life.
I'm serious. Like, I think that's kind of a prerequisite for an extrovert. If you're a twin, you spent a good part of your earlier upbringing, sharing your life with somebody. But I'd like to go back to, and this is really helpful conversation. I love hearing about the nuances between the two, but I want to go back to the comfort zone concept and idea, because I remember when you and I talked last time, you had said something really interesting that, again, resonated with a lot of people. And that was that you actually get yourself to the point where to go out of your comfort zone, you're almost in a terrified state. And that's how you know you need to take the leap. I'm paraphrasing, but like, how do you do that?
Well, it's taken decades of experience. I learned earlier on in my career as an academic. I'm a curious person. I've always had a lot of questions, but I was always afraid to raise my hand because I didn't want to draw attention. I didn't want to get out there, put myself out there. And I would sit through these meetings, different works in progress, different presentations, and I'd have questions and I wouldn't answer or ask them. But there'd be, I'd have a lot of questions, but there'd be one that would make my heart pound. And I'd be like, I should probably ask this question. And in the beginning, I never asked that question. And invariably, maybe someone else would ask it. And the speaker would praise, oh, that's a great question. That's a great way to think about something. Or I would never get my answer. And I would be kicking myself for a really long period of time. And I hated that feeling. So finally, I was like, maybe I should just, if my heart starts pounding, I have to ask the question. And so whenever that happened, I would raise my hand, I'd ask the question, and it would turn into something amazing. Either a great answer, a great discussion. Someone would come up to me after the meeting and say, hey, I really liked your question. Are you working on such and such? And it's led to some really cool things in my life by listening to that heart pounding. If I raise my hand, something good is going to happen. And so it's become a positive feedback loop for me.
Well, so now, and look, I'm just spitballing here, but I would think that most people, if they have a feeling of discomfort, their heart's pounding, they get really nervous, they don't want to have that feeling because it's an anxious feeling. It doesn't make them feel comfortable. So they wind up not doing it. What you're saying is force yourself to do it. Now, by doing that, do you develop a tolerance? Is that how you're growing, is because you're getting more comfortable and more used to being in that discomfort?
I think that's exactly how it works. You can think about it like a muscle, right? You don't start lifting 300-pound weights, right? You have to work your way up to that. So the more you can do to get there, the better. And so for me personally, I have spent the last 2 decades creating like mini personal challenges and different experiments. I'll be like, okay, I will try this and see what happens. So for instance, if you really don't want to go to a networking event because you're an introvert and you're tired, you're like, okay, well, I can't not go. I'll go. Maybe I'll go for 30 minutes, or I'll go and I can leave after I talk to a certain number of people. Or I'll go and I'll enlist an extroverted friend to take me around and be my buddy and be my training wheels to help teach me how to do this networking thing. So finding little ways to navigate within my own personal limitations. And over time, that just kind of, it does expand, it grows. I mean, I'm telling you, like, I was a completely different person 2 decades ago because I've done these mini challenges. Again, also like raising my hand to ask a question. If you struggle with that, give yourself a personal challenge. 30 days, every meeting, ask one question. Enlist an accountability buddy. Like, if I didn't ask a question, nudge me, why did you ask a question? And, sometimes legitimately there is no question to ask, but just give yourself those little challenges and reward yourself for meeting them, and don't kick yourself too hard for not doing it, right? Like, I have taken a million steps forward, and for every step forward, I've taken several steps back. I've had super brave things I've done, and I've had things where I retreated from them because I'm human and I'm me. So it's just give yourself that grace, but also push yourself.
But it's funny. It's almost like you're creating this system of negotiating with yourself.
Yeah.
In a way. I mean, it's goal setting, though. It does come back to goal setting.
It absolutely is.
I mean, that's one way to describe it, is you're kind of negotiating with yourself, saying, well, you can do this, just take it off and bite it off into small chunks. And there's that negotiation. But you take it one step further and you're saying, create goals and set goals for yourself. And I think that by doing that, you're holding yourself accountable. Anytime you create a goal, you're holding yourself accountable to that goal. And that's kind of a non-negotiable.
It's a non-negotiable with some wiggle room, right? Because again, you have to give yourself that grace. You try it and it didn't work out well. Okay, we're going to try again. So it's not a hard and fast, you have to get to this level at this point, right? Because maybe you're just not mentally ready for it. but try and break it down into bite-sized chunks to get yourself to that point. And I think the other key part here is learning not to take yourself too seriously, right? I think one of my favorite quotes is that if you're, don't worry so much about what other people think about you, because they're too busy worrying about what other people think about them. And I think that is a really good thing to put in your back pocket. Like, we are all human, we all flub up, we all make mistakes. And the more you can embrace that about yourself, the better strength you'll have to be able to put yourself forward in uncomfortable positions.
I mean, I do agree with that. Sometimes you just have to just say, get over yourself. It's fine. You're fine. Nobody cares. Right?
Exactly.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Try harder.
Yeah. Coincidentally, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but I had a podcast yesterday with Prashant Desai. It was about mentorship. And by the way, quite a shout out to Prashant. He was awesome. But in his podcast, he actually threw a quote at me. And I'm like, oh my God, that's a Kathy Endorfer quote. But it was, your brilliance is found at the edge of your comfort zone.
There you go. I love it.
Couldn't wait to share that with you.
Yeah, I love it. I've never met him. Now I need to, because apparently he's my soul mate in some ways. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about life. And my favorite quote is from Helen Keller, and it's, life is a daring adventure or nothing at all. And I think that kind of fits exactly within that as well.
Cool. Look at us quoting stuff. I love it. That's so, well, listen, speaking of quotes, if I'm not mistaken, are you writing a book?
I am writing a book.
You are writing a book.
Have written a book.
So wait, you mean it's done?
Well, it's at the point where other people can edit it. So it's like,
what?
It
seems like just yesterday you told me that you were like thinking about writing a book, and now it's pretty much done.
Yeah, well, the reason I wrote the book was because I came on your podcast, and I had so many people reach out to me who were either brand new or aspiring MSLs who were looking for advice, and they wanted to understand the role of an MSL, how to be a good one, how to be a fantastic one. And so I realized that there is a need for it. I know there's a lot of resources for the aspiring MSL, but there's a lot fewer out there for the brand new, first 2 or 3 years of your career MSL. So I wrote the book for them.
Wow, you are a beast. You're straight amazing. No, seriously, and I'm like, this is a natural reaction because you told me this not that long ago, and you weren't even on the podcast that long ago. So I'll tell you, you said you were going to do it, and now you did it. So what is it going to be called?
Well, it's still up for debate, but the working title is The Art of Being a Kick-Ass MSL, which is very close to the title.
That's what it's going to be called. That's totally Kathy. I love that. That is awesome. So, well, you got to let us know where to get it, because I know a lot of people are going to want it. And I'll tell you, you bring up a good point, because there's so much to this role, and there's so much changing in this role. And the more I do this podcast, the more I learn, and the more people come forward and say, oh my God, I really didn't know this, that, the other, whatever. And the more topics come up and the more questions come up. So there's an evolution in process right now. So I think that what you're doing for the people that not only are MSLs, but people that maybe want to break into the role, people that have been in the role, is going to be tremendous, because they're getting it from an expert. They're getting it from your viewpoint, and you're an expert and you have awesome ideas. And I can't wait to read it, because I really want to see what you have to say.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm excited. And in it, I do break down, I start with the foundations of what makes a basic good MSL. What do you need to master before you can get to that next layer of the art form? And we all do often talk about the art of the MSL. It is truly an art form. It's exactly what you're talking about. All those additional fine nuances of the role that are very hard to just tell someone, plug it and play. It doesn't work that way. You have to build that artistic skill. And so I layer on the foundations some of those more fine nuanced pieces of the role, and then ultimately talk about, what's next, where to go, how to build the full career in medical affairs.
Well, I think it's going to be great. I can't wait to check it out. But let's get back to, because I want to get back to where we left off as we were talking about um, getting out of your comfort zone to become, to find your to brilliance, to get to the next level, which ties into the next thought, which, as we're talking about the challenges of being an MSL. So, what advice do you have for MSLs right now that might be struggling, that are going through constant change? We had pre-COVID where everybody kind of maybe figured out the job and knew what they were doing. Then there was COVID where all of a sudden they're thrown into this new reality. And now we're coming out of COVID, but we're almost kind of going back into it. So like, what advice do you have for people?
It's a wonderful question, and it's a very hard one to answer because everybody's comfort level with change is different. And again, I feel it's a little bit like a muscle too. The recognition that a huge element of being successful in this type of role requires resilience. It requires the ability to be flexible and adaptable. But that's not something you could just make happen. It again comes through the small baby steps of, okay, I struggle a little bit with change. What can I do to build that change muscle? How can I leverage my network to feel more comfortable? What do I need to do to feel okay with these changes? And it's going to depend a lot on every individual person, how they go about doing it. But I think, again, having that grace and understanding for yourself that you may be here and the world's over here. And okay, how do you fit within that world, but still honor yourself? And it's a question of building systems, finding tools, reaching out to your network, and doing your best. It's a
Well, it's so
very
funny.
specific answer, but I think it really
No, but there's a theme here, and I know that you're not just sticking to your theme, but I feel like you've found so much success in overcoming adversity. So there's a challenge, and we all face it. I mean, that's part of being human, and that's part of being an MSL, is that you're going to have to handle adversity. But I'm hearing this consistent theme of bite it off in pieces. There's that old, I guess that old expression or that question, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So am I oversimplifying this?
No, I think that's exactly it. And one of my favorite phrases that I probably repeat to myself every day for the last year, it's the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Like you can't, okay, it's great to have the goals. Where do you want to be? What's the ultimate version of yourself in your career and your life? That's great. And right now I'm a million miles away from that, and that's okay. All I have to do is figure out what the next step is, and the next step, and the next step. And I'll probably take a couple steps backwards, and I might go sideways, but eventually I'll do my best to work bit by bit to my goal.
A lot of what we're talking about is intrinsic, and it's kind of this self-motivation, and you're challenging yourself, you're organizing yourself. But how important is it to ask for help and to raise your hand and to solicit help from others in this process?
Oh, hugely important. I think that's everything, right? None of us, we're all as good as our network, and doing it alone is not nearly as fun as doing it with others. And there are so many people in the MSL community and the whole Med Affairs community that are there to help you. I think that's an important thing, to reach out to someone and get advice. Best practice sharing is the biggest thing we do in building our team. Mentorship, that is how you build a career. Build a network, have mentors, ask questions, make friends. That's the secret to success.
And have goals, right? I mean, we talked about that too. I think goals are really important. And I think that if you don't take time with yourself to establish what your goals are and what you want to do, where you want to get to, you're often kind of not working towards something.
Exactly. And that's another thing I do talk about in the book, is figuring out, like, who are you as an MSL? What is your brand? Because each of us has our own skill set, our own unique special sauce that we bring to the role. Recognize that you have your own unique thing. What is that? And then find a way to maybe amplify it and turn that into the way you build your career, the way you build your success. Be the person who's known for your strength. And then recognize, okay, this is my strength. Maybe I'm a little weaker over here. Who can I leverage in my network to help me elevate that weakness? And or what weaknesses can I just say, you know what, that's my weakness and I can't do anything about it. I'm going to accept that about myself and move on from that and focus more energies on my strengths.
You know, it's funny. I think that at some point I'm going to do an episode on being authentic. And I think you just hit on that, how important it is to be authentic and be true to yourself and create your brand based upon your true self.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to record that podcast with you because it's
is that going to be part 3?
Right? Yeah, authenticity and vulnerability too. I think those are two things that are so important and they go hand in hand, right? That vulnerability goes to asking for help. I struggle here, please help me. That's a wonderful strength. It's not a weakness. And authenticity, like if you can't be yourself, maybe you need to work on who yourself is, right? I think we all bring amazing things to the table of life and just find a way to be comfortable with who you are and it'll work out. And there may be, the haters are going to hate and the rest of the world is going to love you for exactly who you are.
I love that. I think that that's just a poetic ending. I don't want to end this because I feel like we should keep talking, but I also feel like that was so perfect.
Okay, well, I'd love to talk to you, so I can always come back or we can keep going now.
No, I mean, I hate to end it because I feel like that was just such a poetic ending. Well, no, let's do this. And we still have a couple more minutes. I want to hear from you as to what your advice is to MSLs as they start to, we're almost done. I hate it's crazy. We're done with the summer and now we're looking at this last part of the year. So what would your advice be to MSLs as they start to look towards the new year, which I know isn't tomorrow, but it is coming up. So as people start to look at their individual development plans, what do people really need to keep in mind? Because in this ever-changing environment, we're really not sure exactly what's going to happen. I want to hear from the expert. I want to hear from you. What would you tell people?
That's a great question. It's going to depend a lot on where the MSL is in their career. It's going to depend a lot on what products they're working on are in their life cycle. But overall, I think as we close out a year, it's always good to do reflection. Look back on this previous year, this year. How did it go? Where did it go well? Where could you have done better? Reflection is a huge element of being successful. And then set your goals for next year. Okay, you did this well. What could you do to take it to the next level? How can you get yourself? Because even when you're great, you could always get another level higher. So what does that look like? And then also consider, what's your next career move? And even if you're 3 or 4 years away from that, having it in mind is very helpful in terms of figuring out what projects do you want to get involved in? Who do you need to start networking with inside your company? What do you need to be thinking about? So reflection and forward thinking, and then being in the present and just crushing whatever your day job is, because that's another hugely important element. I think sometimes people are so involved with looking at their past mistakes, what they could have done differently. And they're so involved with trying to get to the next big shiny object that they forget that if they just focus on this moment and be the best version of themselves that they can be right here, right now, with what their job is, with the thought leaders they have, with the company they're in, whatever their job is. If you do that really well, awesome things will come.
That's great. I love that. And that's so, I'll tell you, I really need that advice because I don't take enough time to stop and reflect. I'm always going a million miles an hour trying to get, to move forward and, crush it. Just like you said, but I think that it's important to I actually wrote that down. I think it's important to self-reflect a little bit and take a look back to see where you're going.
Yeah, definitely.
This is like, I feel like this was just poetry, this conversation. I have so many quotes. There's so many buzzwords I wrote down. I love it. I can't wait to go back and listen to this one because I definitely will.
Oh, well, awesome. I'm so excited to have been here. As always, it is a true joy and pleasure to speak with you. These things are terrifying in advance. And then once we're doing it, I feel as if it's just a normal conversation with you because you're so lovely to speak with.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you. And I'm excited about your book. So I want to hear more about it. When it's ready, I want you to let me know about it. And then I want to figure out how we can give everybody a heads up as to where to get it and that sort of thing. So listen, guys, stay tuned. More to come on that. But Kathy, I will let you go and get your weekend started. But I appreciate you, and I always love to talk to you. So thank you for coming back on.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom.
Part 3, authenticity. We're doing it.
Done.
All right, my friend. Take care.
All right, bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe so that you don't miss episodes in the future, and feel free to leave a rating or a review or a comment. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.